More than 3.5 million Nigerians were stolen from this land and shipped across the Atlantic. But here is what they don't teach you in school. Nigeria wasn't just a victim in the transatlantic slave trade. We were the epic center, the beating heart of the largest forced immigration in human history. Picture this, it's the 1400s. Portuguese ships are sailing down the West African coast, not looking for slaves initially, but for gold, spices, and that mythical Christian kingdom of Prester John. When they reached our shores in 1471, they found something far more valuable to European eyes: us. The Kingdom of Benin was thriving. The Oba's court was sophisticated, powerful, and initially they welcomed these strange visitors. Portuguese soldiers fought alongside Benin warriors. Portuguese language was even spoken in the Oba's palace. They traded our pepper, ivory, and yes, some slaves, for coral beads, Indian textile, and European weapons. But here is where the story takes a dark turn that would reshape our continent forever. Two things happened that changed everything. First, Portuguese found better spices in Asia, so they stopped buying our pepper. Second, and this is crucial, the Kingdom of Benin made a decision that would isolate them from centuries of profit and pain. They banned the export of slaves. Yes, you heard that right. While the rest of today's Benin Republic and Nigerian coast became known as the Slave Coast, Benin said no. They continued to use slaves domestically, but refused to participate in the transatlantic trade. It was a moral stand that cost them economically but saved them from the blood money that corrupted other kingdoms. Meanwhile, two powerful forces emerged to fill this gap: the Oyo Empire in the southwest and the Aro Confederacy in the southeast. Oyo was a cavalry powerhouse. Their horses couldn't survive the forest, but they found a natural gap that allowed them to push south to the coast. More horses meant more raid. More raid meant more captives. More captives meant more wealth from the European traders. But power corrupted. Oyo's success in the slave trade led to internal power struggles. Kings were forced to commit suicide by their own councils. In 1754, a military oligarchy took over completely. It was a kingdom literally tearing itself apart from the inside. In the southeast, the Aro Confederacy played a different game entirely. They were the puppet masters of the slave trade, using religion, diplomacy, and fear to control the flowing human cargo. Picture this, you're an Igbo villager with a dispute. Where do you go? The Aro Oracle at Arochukwu, hidden in a mysterious gorge. The Aro priests were considered sacred, untouchable. They could travel anywhere safely, and when you brought your case to their oracle, you might pay fines in slaves or dedicate slaves to the gods as scapegoats. Those slaves, they became property of the Aro priest, who was free to sell them to coastal traders. But here is the genius and the horror of it. The Aro created a network of markets, a 24-day cycle of fairs across Igbo land. They had treaties with coastal ports like Calabar and Bonny. They had military allies who could raid any village that broke agreements with them. It was a sophisticated business empire built on human suffering. At the coast, the Ijaw people transformed from humble fishermen into wealthy slave traders. Towns like Bonny and Calabar grew from small fishing villages into cities of 10,000 people, ruled by merchant princes who grew rich from human cargo. These weren't just victims of European demands. They were entrepreneurs, middlemen who understood that in this new economy, human lives had become the most valuable currency. By the 1700s, British ships were carrying 2/5 of all slaves across the Atlantic, and Nigeria had become their primary source. We supplied more slaves than Angola in the 18th century, and by the 1800s, 30% of all enslaved Africans came from our lands. Here's what haunts me about this history. Nigeria wasn't just exploited by Europeans. We were active participants. Our kingdoms, our merchants, and religious leaders, they all profited from selling our own people. But here is a question that should keep us up at night. What if Benin example had been followed? What if every Nigerian kingdom had said no to the slave trade like the Edo people did? Would we have been colonized? Would our ancestors have been stolen? Would Nigeria today be the giant of Africa, not just in population, but in unbroken cultural continuity? The choices our ancestors made, both the victims and the perpetrators, shaped the Nigeria we inherited. What choices are we making today that will shape the Nigeria our children will inherit? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this opened your eyes to our complex history, share it with someone who needs to know that African history is never black and white. It's human, complicated, and absolutely essential to understand.